Good afternoon, students. Our next topic is fall of the ancient Roman Empire, which means the downfall of the oldest Roman Empire. A number of causes are responsible for the downfall of the ancient Roman Empire. So, students, there were many causes because of which the downfall of the ancient Roman Empire happened. Okay, and are related to imperialism, because imperialism destroyed democracy and encouraged slavery. So one of the most important cause was imperialism. Imperialism means to rule over, किसी पे शासन करना, ठीक है. And because of this imperialism, it destroyed the democracy of the people and it encouraged slavery. That is why it is called the most important cause. It created lazy city mobs and political conflicts and corruption. And because of imperialism, people did not take any interest in the growth of the empire. Okay, and political conflicts also occurred there, and corruption and vast corruption was there. The internal struggles for power and the religious changes of the period were also the causes of the downfall of the Roman Empire. And the internal struggle for power and the religious changes of the period, and people were struggling for the powers. Okay, and the religious changes were also the causes of the downfall of the Roman Empire. Neither agriculture nor industries could thrive because the slaves had no interest in production, which was all for the aristocrats and the rich landlords. And students, in Roman Empire, neither agriculture nor industry could thrive. Thrive means it did not increase. Why? Because the slaves had no interest in production, and the slaves of that empire did not take any interest in production. Why? Because all the production goes to aristocrats and the rich landlords. That is why they did not take any interest in the production for the empire. The advent of Christianity in Rome played a vital role in the fall of the Roman Empire. And the advent of Christianity in Rome, as Christianity reached in Rome, it played a vital role, important role in the fall of the Roman Empire. Christianity, with its ideals of equality and love, had a great appeal for the Romans. And the main idol of Christianity is equality and love, and they had a great appeal for equality and love for the people. Okay, the believers of Christianity were willing to endure persecution by the emperors, and the believers of Christianity were against the persecution by the emperors, okay, and even die for their faith, and they died for their faith, okay. Emperor Constantine was the first ruler to ask Christians to build churches and worship openly, okay. And Emperor Constantine, he was the first ruler who gave the permission to build churches and to worship Jesus Christ openly, okay. The final blow came from the barbarian invaders. So student, barbarian invader means uncivilized invaders. Invader means the one who attacks, okay. So uncivilized attackers of North Europe like Goths, Franks, Visigoths and Vandals, okay. Finally, in 476 AD, the Vandals overthrew the emperor of the Western Empire, and in 476 AD, the Vandals overthrew means defeated the emperor of the Western Empire and established their chieftain as the king. And after defeating the emperor of the Western Empire, they established their chieftain as the king, okay, in the Western Empire. The impact of fall of the Roman Empire, okay. So what was the impact of the fall of the Roman Empire? The fall of the Roman Empire had an adverse impact on Latin learning, okay. Because of the fall of the Roman Empire, it had an adverse impact. Adverse means opposite impact on Latin learning, okay. It affected, it had a great effect on Latin learning. The spread of Latin language was halted, and the spread of Latin language was halted. Halted means stopped, okay. The use of Latin language declined both officially and unofficially, and as the Roman Empire fall down, the use of Latin language was declined, okay, both officially and unofficially. No one was allowed to speak Latin language officially and unofficially. The Germanic invention altered the linguistic character of Western Europe. The Germanic invention means invention done by the Germans changed the language related character of Western Europe. Linguistic means language related, okay. Altered means changed. So the invention done by the Germans changed the language related character of the Western Europe. They raised great confusion in Western Europe. Sorry, these raised great confusion in Western Europe, and the change in the language related character of Western Europe raised a great confusion in Western Europe because of Germanic invention, and large number of small states sprang up. Okay, and many small states sprang up means came into existence. Now, Byzantine Empire. In 455 AD, the Vandals invaded the city of Rome and plundered it. In 455 AD, the Vandals invaded means attacked the city of Rome and plundered it. Plundered it means robbed it, लूट लिया. ठीक है. In 455 AD, the Vandals attacked the city of Rome and robbed it. Okay. In 476 AD, the last Roman emperor Romulus Augustus was deposed. In 476 AD, the last Roman emperor, who was Romulus Augustus, was deposed. Means he was lay off. Means his position was taken by him. After this, only a remnant of the Roman Empire survived in the east, and after the depose of the last Roman emperor Romulus, the remnant means remaining part of the Roman Empire survived. Okay, in the east, in the east side. Okay, with its capital Constantinople. The truncated empire is referred to as the Byzantine Empire, and the remaining part of this empire was called as the Byzantine Empire. Okay, or the Eastern Roman Empire, and the other name of Byzantine Empire was Eastern Roman Empire. The Byzantine Empire had some features of the Roman civilization. Okay, so this empire had some features of the Roman civilization. A central feature of Byzantine culture was Orthodox Christianity, and the central feature was Orthodox Christianity of Byzantine Empire, Byzantine culture. Orthodox means fundamentalist. Okay, रूढ़िवादी. The empire had trade relation with the eastern countries, and this Byzantine Empire had trade relation means business relation with the eastern countries. The empire declined after 1453 AD, and after 1453 AD, this empire also declined. Okay, the downfall of this empire happened after 1453 AD with the fall of Constantinople. The downfall of this empire happened with the downfall of the Constantinople. When the authorities of Constantinople reached in the hands of Turks. Okay, that time this empire also declined. Now Monasteries and Nunneries. In medieval period, priests started living in lonely places instead of living amongst people in crowded places like towns and cities. So students, in medieval period, priest who is worshipper of God like pastors or father started living in lonely places instead of living amongst people in crowded places like towns and cities. They used to live alone instead of living with the people in towns and cities. They were known as monks, and these priests were known as monks, and the places where they lived and worshipped were known as monasteries, and their place where they lived and worshipped were known as monasteries. The word monk is derived from Greek word which means alone, and this word monk came from a Greek word the meaning of which is alone. Monks and nuns were generally the most educated people, and these monks and nuns were the most educated people. Monks led a very simple life, and their life was very simple, devoting their time in worship and prayers. And they used to devote their time in worship and prayers. They also started providing service to the people by helping the poor, sick, and needy. And they provide help to the poor, sick, and needy. They spoke little and practiced austerity. And they used to speak less and practiced austerity. Austerity means tapasya. And they focus on their austerity. And they focused on their austerity. They were loyal to their order and were not allowed to have personal belongings. Okay, and they were loyal to their service, and they were not allowed to have personal belongings. Okay, personal belongings like their own bed, their own car, their own anything that belongs to him they cannot, anything that belongs to them they cannot keep with them, and they were not allowed to have such things with them. They spent much of their day in silence. Okay, most of the time they used to spend their time in silence. Saint Benedict, an Italian formed the first community of monks in Europe. Saint Benedict, who was from Italy, he formed the first community of monks in Europe in around 6th century AD. He laid down rules of piety which became a standard code of monastic life in the following period. And made some he made rules of piety. Piety means righteousness. And these rules made by him became a standard code of monastic life. Standard code for monks and nuns in the following period. His community known as Benedictine order and the community made by Saint Benedict was known as Benedictine order became famous all over Europe within a short period of time, and it became famous in all over Europe within a short period of time. Benedict Benedictine monks were also called the black monks as they bore black habit, and these monks were also called black monks. Why? Because they used to wear this black habit. Okay, this is habit. Benedictine monasteries were established by Saint Augustine in England, and the monasteries, the living place of these monks, were established by Saint Augustine. These monasteries were built by Saint Augustine in England. Okay. In 910 AD, a new monastic order was formed in Cluny in France, which was known as Cluniacs. Okay. In 910, a new monastic order was formed in Cluny. Cluny is a city in France, which was known as Cluniacs. These were known for their high moral conduct and were sought after bishops. And these Cluniacs were known for their high moral. High moral means they were very disciplined, they were of very good disciplined conduct and were sought after bishops, and their position comes after bishops and archbishops. They further took on the work of reforming the church started by Saint Benedict, and and they and they did the work of reforming the church started by Saint Benedict. For keeping themselves going, the monasteries obtained funds and lands from devoted Christians, and to continue their life, they used to take funds and lands from the devoted Christians. In the later period, these monasteries grew in size, and after some years, These the monasteries grew in size, their number increased, and importance grew in size and importance, and their importance also increased, and became a part and parcel of the Christian church organization. And they became a part of the Christian church organization. Monasteries and nunneries were generally huge and strong buildings surrounded by gardens, fruit orchards, fields, and ponds. So, monasteries and nunneries were huge and strong buildings surrounded by gardens, fruit orchards, fields, and ponds. Okay, monasteries where they used to live. Each monastery had its own small church, hospital, school, inn, and library. And in each monastery there were own small church, hospital, school, inn, and library. In the churches there were many separate rooms for holding prayers. Okay, there were separate rooms for prayers, kitchens, storerooms, and residential quarters for monks. The monks did not marry and devoted their lives to prayer, and these monks did not marry. Okay, and they devoted their life to prayer and the service of humanity. The women who also did the same were known as nuns, and the women who used to live like monks were known as nuns. They started living in separate monasteries called nunneries, and the place of living of nuns called nunneries or convents. This means they too could not marry, and these nuns were not allowed to marry, or because they devoted their life to prayers and service for the poor, sick, and the downtrodden. Downtrodden means poor people. Thus, life of a monastery was well organized. Okay, the life of this monastery was well organized. The nuns had to lead a simple life and to observe rigid disciplines, and they had to lead a simple life. Okay, and they observed rigid disciplines, and the discipline which they followed was very rigid. Okay, rigid means kathor. The members of monastery were very poor, and the members of this monastery were very poor. The monasteries themselves were rich and powerful institutions. Okay, these monasteries were rich and powerful institutions. They gathered wealth from land and property and donated to their members. And they used to gather the wealth from their land and properties, and they donated it to their members. as monastery was presided over by an abbot, so it was also known as abbey. So these monasteries were ruled over by a person who is known as abbot. So it was also known as abbey. Now, importance of monasteries. Central of production. Importance of monasteries were center of production. Monasteries rendered various services to the people. Many monks did manual labor on farms, and they rendered various services to the people, and they did manual labor means they did work on farms. They grew crops, reclaimed lands, and conserved forests. Some of them worked as skilled craftsmen, shoemakers, millers, beekeepers, etc. These monks did all these activities to for the production. Okay. Art and culture. The greatest contribution of the monasteries in the medieval period was in the field of education and art. Okay. They they gave a greatest contribution in the fields of education and art. At the initial stage, education was limited to young boys only. Okay, earlier only young boys were getting the education. However, later on it was extended to young men, and later this later young men also got the education. In due course of time, some of these monasteries developed into famous universities of 12th and 13th century, and some of these monasteries became famous universities of 12th and 13th century. Many subjects like religion, history, philosophy, medicine, law, and astrology were taught in these universities, and these were the subjects they used to teach in their universities. At the time, at that time, books were handwritten on specially prepared animal skin called parchment, and there were books on which handwritten texts were there, specially prepared on animal skin called parchment. These beautifully these beautifully made books were mostly the copies of the Bible and prayer books. Okay, they also copied Latin and Greek books on different subjects and recorded the daily events. Okay, and they also wrote Latin and Greek books on different subjects and recorded the daily events. These books are the source of medieval history. Thus, in this way, monks largely preserved the ancient and medieval culture of Europe. The main focus of the art was on religion and Christianity. Okay, the main focus of the art of this period was on religion and Christianity. These monks and nuns had great focus on the religion and Christianity. Why these arts and crafts?